Hello everyone and welcome to the 19th episode of Tobi's Arts Performed podcast. My name is Toby and I'm your host.
Bienvenido a Tobi's Arts Performed podcast. En esta plataforma, Tobi se relacionará con varios artistas y consumidores de arte acerca de sus pasiones y intereses.
This week I speak to Sebastian Hau-Walker, a half-Mexican live artist who I first saw performing as La Santa Muerte, or The Holiest Death, in the Bethnal Green Working Man's Club, and I first spoke to him at the Future Ritual performance on the 15th of December in the space in Hackney, where he did the filming and sound recording. In this episode, he talks about the distinction between live art and performance art, and the influence the Club Kids New York scene had on his art and life. Sebastian is performing at the Camden People's Theatre on the 17th of March, along with other artists and performers. So please look up the Facebook link here, or on the Camden People's Theatre website for details. But in the meantime, please enjoy. So just for the listeners, you're half Mexican.
Yes, yeah.
So I met you properly at the Future Ritual on the 15th of December, where you did the sound and technical support and recording and stuff.
Yeah.
So we'll come back to that, but I saw you first of all at the Bethnal Green Working Men's Club, the event being the Deep Trash at the Underworld.
Yes.
So I couldn't remember your name then, and I couldn't remember what the performance was called, but can you start off by saying a bit about that?
Yes. So I made a new piece of work from some new research, and it was called Santa Muerte, which means you can translate it as Most Holy or Holiest Death, which is inspired by a lot of things, but mostly from the death cult folk saint La Santa Muerte, which is predominantly has her devotees in Mexico and Mexico City.
Oh, right. So, okay. So, for the benefit of the listeners, earlier on, I had a look on I found your website, your YouTube, and there's a 13-minute video.
Yes, my mega mix.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the figurine that people are carrying around with the dark face, I didn't connect it, so I should have. Now it makes sense.
Yeah.
So can you give a bit of expand on that?
Yes. So what you saw on the YouTube clip was the audio and kind of video like backing track to the piece, which I would hope to try kind of contextualize some of the kind of rituals and kind of the image of La Santa Muerte, especially because she's not particularly known here in the UK or in Europe. So I thought it would be quite useful to have something kind of visual that would link to what I was doing on stage.
Yeah.
So again, I'm no expert on La Santa Muerte. I'm still very much learning. But what I know is that she is kind of certain anthropologists see her as a kind of emerging out of a cult of crisis. So people who were kind of Catholic devotees, because Catholicism is still pretty much the predominant faith practice in Mexico. Certain people within that don't feel they can subscribe completely to Catholicism, and they're often people who are seen by Catholicism as being kind of marginalised. So people who work at night, sex workers, the kind of queer community, taxi drivers.
Really?
Especially the cartels, people who work in them and connected to them.
Yeah.
So it's interesting looking at how people who've not felt kind of they're able to completely commit to Catholicism have kind of come together to worship La Santa Muerte. And La Santa Muerte is she's essentially a kind of grim reaperess of this kind of skeletal figure in this kind of big robe, carries a scythe and an owl.
Yeah.
Often she's seen with other objects like a globe or like red apples.
When I saw the performance, you came out with and now it makes sense, like what you're wearing and the side and everything. But what I noticed first of all, that we couldn't see your face at all, or I couldn't, and I was pretty much near the front. But what I recognised was a couple of the other performances that I saw. They didn't. I mean, I won't criticise them directly, but their performance didn't quite work in the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
So did you kind of do a recce before to see how it would work?
Partly, yeah. I mean, we had a very...
Because it worked perfectly. I was just mesmerised by this kind of faceless figure.
I had done... I'm usually quite good at kind of coming up with a piece, but actually it was quite a tough process, I think.
Yeah.
It was working with I was finding it difficult to work within the club context. I used to make quite a lot of work in clubs, and I've kind of moved away from that. So it's trying to kind of relearn everything about what it means to make a work in that kind of space. So we had a very short technical rehearsal, but I think what I was really keen on was that there would be as least lights as possible, and there would be as much UV. I actually bought a special UV light because I was looking at the fact I had all this white face paint on, and that would then pick up
of course,
and then kind of create that contrast stronger than if it was just a
You
general
had
wash.
white face paint on.
Yes.
How did you manage to keep your face dark when you came out, though?
Yes.
Now I can reckon, because I remember when you put the tequila on you.
Yes.
I saw the paint running. Yeah. But when you came out, first of all, you couldn't see any features at all.
I was veiled. I had a kind of white veil on.
Oh, okay.
I think from doing my research, there's one of her kind of key tropes that she's kind of, as how she's dressed, is vested, is this kind of what they call la niña blanca, which is like the white girl. So she's seen as this kind of very virginal, kind of bridal figure. So I think I kind of had lots of white fabric that I was trying to kind of emulate a wedding dress, because I didn't have the budget to actually buy one.
You say she comes from a merging of the two faiths, but does she originate in a pre-Spanish deity? Yeah,
and there's a lot of research into kind of her being such a kind of complex figure, and it's difficult to kind of separate the pre-colonial and post-colonial kind of facets of her.
Yeah.
So a lot of kind of theorists have looked at that. She is takes a lot of influence from an Aztec gods, an Aztec worship of skeletal figures who were kind of kings and queens of the underworld. Right. I can't exactly remember their Aztec names, very long, but I could look them up. But then also there's that kind of Spanish influence of the Grim Reaper.
So the character of the I'm not going to say it because I'll say it terribly.
Holy Death, most holy.
Holy Death. So the character of this deity, as it is used in Mexico now, is that a very modern concept, or is it within the space of the Spanish conquest?
I think her kind of recent kind of rise to fame, or like the growing of devotees, is quite recent.
Right.
I was reading that there's a certain neighbourhood in Mexico City called Tepito, and there was a lot of people said they were practicing their faith to her kind of in secret. And then there's a woman called Enriqueta Romeros who decided one day that she was going to turn her front living room into kind of her own chapel. So she kind of rebuilt it and turned it into this kind of open communal space where she presented her figure of the Santa Muerte. and since then it's become this kind of de facto place of worship for people all around Mexico to come to, which I think, I mean, I'm fascinated by that, the fact somebody has taken it upon themselves to turn their own space into
it's interesting, isn't it?
Kind of community centre, but for faith, but for this faith that is not it's not even recognised. It's considered kind of like satanic by both the Catholic Church and Mexican government as well.
Really?
Yeah. I think because it has such a strong link to the cartels, it has this kind of shroud of being evil, illegal.
Well, I suppose it has the added benefit as well in terms of, and this is kind of my ideas of art and power. It has the added benefit of putting a black mark against other parts of society, like you say, the queer community, prostitutes, the poor, drug addicts and stuff. The holiest death, that female deity, the evolution of the current devotion to her and the culture that surrounds it. You're saying that's within the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, probably 20 now. Now that we're in the 20.
So I mean, I see similar things specifically within the art world, and it's performance art that's interesting me in particular. But what I'm seeing more and more is that performance art is very particular to rituals, future rituals. That was the thing on, is it the Space Studios?
Yep.
On the 15th of December. So all of those were different rituals that they did, different performances and different rituals, and also yours as well. It just interests me that different artists, particularly performance artists, are reconnecting with a kind of ritualistic expressions of their art, and in some way actually reconnecting with communities, not resisting against kind of capitalism and stuff like that, but I suppose responding to it in a way. I mean, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah. I've also kind of noticed that kind of zeitgeist as well of people.
What is your field of study at the moment? Is it a master's you're doing?
Yes, I'm doing a master's in contemporary performance practices at UEL, University of East London, which is a great title because it can mean anything, which is quite useful. You can do whatever you want. Yeah, we have clowns, puppeteers, performance artists, action-based. Yeah. People straight from a kind of BA dance backgrounds. So it's a really interesting mix of students. Yes, I think people's work has kind of always been quite ritualistic. I think what's interesting now is the fact that kind of platforms, curators, festivals are kind of now kind of showcasing that work. And there's an interesting thing when you can see the work of your peers kind of having had that kind of element to it. Yeah. But then there's another element. The other side is then, does it actually get shown? Like, who then programs in it? Where does it get? Or do then people come together like Future Ritual to then say, oh, it's clear we're all making this kind of work. Why aren't we then making nights about this? But I think there's definitely, I think a lot of those artists would say it is kind of trying to be counter kind of late capitalism, trying to connect to this kind of more ancient kind of ideas of things that are...
I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's connecting with an ancient ideas. I think it connects with something that's kind of transcends any timeline. Let's go back for a moment, because this is really intriguing me. Would you say that in Mexico, the cult of the holiest death, I want to say the words, but I can't, I'm not going to get it right, I know that. What is it?
You could say Santa Muerte.
Santa Muerte.
Muerte.
Santa Muerte. So the cult of Santa Muerte. No. let's just go with Holiest Death.
Holiest Death.
So the cult of the Holiest Death. Would you agree that it would have started with the poorer people within that part of Mexico and the prostitutes and those at the very bottom?
Yes. Yeah.
But I'm interested in the fact that the cartels have picked it up, because the first time you remind me actually of a BBC News report that focused on the cartels, and I didn't really know much about it, but I remember this news report, and they were talking about the cartels being very engaging with the deity of the Holiest Death.
Right. Okay.
Speaking nothing about the other characters, and it spoke a little bit about the deity herself.
Okay, great.
Not much, but there was nothing about the other parts of society, the lower parts of society that are affected by the cartels. It just spoke about the cartels. And I did an essay that I submitted yesterday, actually, and it spoke about sort of the intellectuals in power and how certain intellectuals like Guattari and Deleuze, Deleuze and Foucault speak about people struggling against power, but don't give them an identity, don't give them a character. They just speak about them in relation to the power, as opposed to those people with an independent character.
Yes, and I can see how that was kind of being replicated when she was kind of allied just to the cartels. So it's almost she is just the deity for the cartels, or some kind of patron saint for the cartels.
Well, it makes perfect sense that the cartels would use such a character. One reason being they can use the character of the Holiest Death to impose fear against their people, the people of Mexico, but also they can, in a Machiavellian way, actually using fear and intimidation, but also solidarity. Yes. It's a kind of it shouldn't work, but it works. Yeah. It's actually capitalism at its finest.
Yeah. I think the problem is if other groups of people then want to identify with her, they are then kind of forced to have to confront other groups of people's abuses or uses of her image and kind of beliefs.
In what way, though?
I guess in terms of kind of like news report, I think it's interesting when I was doing my research and how I kind of like came making the kind of the YouTube video of looking at how.
So you actually made that video yourself?
Yes, yeah.
Did you do the filming?
No, that's all from some of it. The beginning shots of like the moon is quite a patchwork, quite a mix. Some of the first shots were mine, and then the shots of the people undergoing some of the rituals. I've been like bathed in tequila and having the kind of the sage whips on them. That was from the news reports. But how the news reports always try and kind of through the interview process, they're always trying to their first question is this satanic? Are you a Satanist? And then people have to respond and say no, because for me, her image is about accepting that death is part of everyday society, particularly for somebody in my position in what I work in, or I've encountered death recently through family members or within my community. It's difficult to then kind of push to, as you say, not to kind of go deeper into like, well, who is La Santa Muerte? Who is she? And where has she come from? It always feels always gets anchored back to the kind of negative reception, the bad press, or the.
You're a performance artist, or was it live art?
Yeah, I'd say a live artist. I used to be a performance artist, but
what's the difference?
What's the difference? Yeah, I think what I like about being a live artist is that it's a very open format. I think I've encountered lots of issues when we use the word performance art and it has this very strong connotation towards being about body-based practice, about action-based, often quite abstract, not having any relationship to theatre or down to any kind of more conventional ideas of performance history, and it's coming more from a kind of visual art background. And I don't think I have that.
Right.
I know how to make performance art. I feel like I can make performance art if I wanted. I have made it.
So the performance you did at Deep Trash,
yes,
that was live art, or
I would, yeah. Whereas I would see that more as a piece of performance art. This is what.
Right.
Whereas being a live artist, I feel you are allowed to make performance. I feel I'm kind of making comments on like who can be allowed to make work, but I think it's both useful and not useful saying you're a live artist, because if you say you're a live artist, you can then make things like theatre and like work for like the digital space and also performance art.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting the way people use language and stuff, because when you get down to it, it's all about interpretation, really, isn't it? It's you could use any argument to support it or to discredit it, really, couldn't you?
Exactly. And also how but how that's still kind of the interpretation is still shared. It's kind of like shared meaning. I've been rereading Stuart Hall, Representation.
Okay. I've been reading him for both of my essays.
The godfather of cultural studies. God bless. So what I found is when outside of the UK, live art nobody understands what live art is. But it's easier to say you're a performance artist. I think particularly going to places like Germany or France, where it's kind of performance art is kind of still quite a very recognised medium, perhaps more so than it has here.
Quite well established there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, they have the history of the cabaret. Like, I think was it the film with Liza Minnelli?
Yes.
Is that cabaret?
Yeah, that's
But
cabaret.
it kind of precedes that even like 50 or so years.
I mean, cabaret again is its own. What I would see as its own form. I think thinking about it on a political level, I think often when I've encountered performance artists, it becomes very politicised that they try and reclaim performance art from live art and from other disciplines because they want it to become. They don't want it to be for it to become something else.
Yeah.
Whereas I guess I've always been quite keen on what can performance be. I think the way I was taught for my BA, it was very much we were pushed to think about performance being a performance itself as a medium, being in the process, and it can be through new technologies and like through new contexts. It will shift and emerge and become something new.
Is there any conflict between you performing and creating art and the study of art? Because it seems to me that I'm not an artist myself, but in my studies, I come up against the idea of writing essays and doing academic work that insist you must kind of do it in a very academic, scientific way. Whereas the way I think and the way I try to express myself is not scientific at all. I understand the value of science and the value of analysing things, but it's not important in the grand scheme of things. And how do you feel about that yourself?
Yeah, I think having left like the academic institution, what I'm struggling with in a minute is kind of remembering all of the theory that was quite important to me kind of 5-7 years ago. that once you leave kind of the academic institution,
Yeah.
kind of becomes very sidelined. Everything becomes very pragmatic and practical. And how do you find money to make the work? How does it what agendas is it filling in terms of who's giving you the money, if the work is involved kind of monetary value or funding in some capacity. I feel I wouldn't really reference Foucault or Derrida or Sisu or anybody that I would when I was in my undergraduate. But I guess the agenda there is because you're in the academic institution, what you're making needs to fulfil the criteria of it having a rigorous conceptual basis, or having like a strong inspirational connection to what you're reading.
So can you talk about your upbringing? So you were born and raised in Birmingham, is that right?
No, I was born in Mexico.
Oh, you were born in Mexico?
Yeah, born in Mexico, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, lived there till I was 7.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I was raised bilingual. My mother is ESOL TEFL teacher, English as a foreign language.
Yeah.
So I've always spoken English. And because I wasn't born, I was raised in Birmingham, I don't necessarily have a Brummie accent. Though if I'm with certain people for long enough, it comes out. You'll hear it. So we lived there till I was 7. We moved to the UK. Moved around the UK a lot. Lived in Bristol, London, Liverpool, and then eventually settled in Birmingham because my grandparents are from Wolverhampton, so it was very close right. Big city to find work and to be close to them. And so I lived there from kind of 8 till 18, it's about 10 years before I left to go to university.
So what directed you towards art?
Yeah.
Were you always creating art or being creative?
That's a good question. I feel like I was always interested in performing. I think I started when we moved to Birmingham. I started doing a lot of kind of contemporary dance and ballet. Not that I'm anyway trained in ballet. I would never make. Probably one thing I would never make would be a piece of ballet.
Right.
I think I moved away from kind of that kind of dance practice. Because I didn't feel particularly represented. I think I find it difficult to engage with the certain kind of bodies that were seen as being like idealised, and I thought that's not me. I don't identify. I counter-identify with that. So I was interested in theatre and kind of this idea of like narratives and stories and people, and I went to kind of theatre school for about 5-7 years. Next to my studies, but again through that I found that difficult because I thought I'm tired of pretending to be people that I'm not. I want to find out who I am, and I guess it's through that attempt at wanting to kind of understand who you are and like your personal limits and identity that I came to, particularly in theatre, looking at devised theatre. I was interested in making. I was also tired of being given a script and said, okay, you are this character. Often being told to play characters of other ethnicities that I was not, South Asian characters I was given. That was also problematic because I thought this is weirdly am I being forced to appropriate? Yeah. Because I mean it's kind of very kind of white theatre school here, and I'm a person of colour. But also not anyway can't represent these communities. But it was through kind of the kind of devising modules where you were told to kind of make your own work that I was sort of like, this is what I want to do. I'm interested in making my own kind of performance. How do I do this? Where do I go to do this? And I think around 16 and 17 I started meeting some friends who were interested in kind of, I think I started to kind of go out more to kind of clubs, and there were lots of people there who were kind of in that kind of late club kid scene. Well, for Birmingham, are kind of like people who were inspired by that.
For the benefit of the listeners, can you describe what the club kids
The club kids are. So they were. I guess they are. I guess. Do they still exist? It seems so. I think there's a kind of.
They do.
Their influence is like everywhere, I suppose now. In the kind of 90s in New York, in the kind of nightclubs throughout in there, they were kind of group of, I don't know if they consider themselves like artists, but definitely club goers who had a very extravagant, outrageous dress sense, and they would put on their own events with each other. And some fantastic like news interviews to news where they went on like Michael Alec, James Slattery, and so on, where they get interviewed in their costume. And I think it was looking at that and seeing that kind of almost extreme way of presenting the self that I think really drew me to be like, how much they were taking their sense of dress to kind of to this next level. I think kind of relating back to me being in Birmingham, I think meeting people there, and around that time there was a lot of the kind of flash mob kind of thing was taking off in the UK at least, and we decided to organise our own. I think that's kind of where I felt kind of very free, but also but also still receiving a lot of difficulty of people not understanding what the hell we were doing. That kind of like violence of both physical and also verbal, and people not understanding what we're trying to do in that sense, in the sense of like kind of dressing up in wallpaper. I remember that was a great moment. So as part of our flash mob crew, we decided we would hold a flash mob once a month in a different place, and we would have a dress code responding to that place. So we did one on the train, we did one in Tesco's in a supermarket, and we did one in McDonald's. And the theme was bad taste, and I decided what was the worst taste thing I could wear. I thought, I'm going to wear wallpaper. That would do. So I kind of made this like constructed outfit of the worst wallpaper I could find, and I got on this kind of the 50 bus, which is like Birmingham is very bad in terms of its transport links. So everyone, but it's either that if you're lucky enough to live next to a train, you have to get a bus. But it means everyone gets a bus. So there, as spaces, you're met by every person, and a lot of people. If you've never seen somebody dressed in wallpaper, that's quite a scene to make. Quite a statement. But I think I had quite a late adolescence in terms of that kind of rebellious streak. So I think when it hit me, it kind of hit me twice as hard, and I thought I really just want to be as outrageous and ridiculous and like not give a fuck as much as possible. So and that was my way of expressing that. And then how that ties back to finding my BA. I think I then heard about this, like I was trying to look for kind of art colleges because I thought I wanted to do art, but I didn't necessarily want to do like a foundation. I wanted to kind of go and study more kind of, what was now we see as performance art. So that's how I found that the course at Dartington. Lots of people were directing me to say, I think what you do, what you make, or who you're becoming would suit that kind of place. And it was. I think it was the best 3 years of my life. I think it was good to have left Birmingham. I think I found Birmingham quite a difficult city in some respects. There was lots of very interesting people, but not enough kind of community for me to kind of like knuckle down and like actually make lots of stuff and kind of really get to know groups of artists that I still keep in touch with today.
So what's the art scene like now in Birmingham?
I think I'd say it's improved. I mean, he said, "Here I am in London." I think having that second city syndrome of having left the city. I feel it's improved now, maybe because of the internet. I think looking at how what I found difficult growing up there was that it was difficult to know where things were happening. Everything was very word of mouth, or somebody would invite you to an opening or to a club night. Whereas now with the internet, especially kind of social media, you can pick up all of that. And in terms of opportunity, I think it's more. I feel it's easier for the younger generation to make to find opportunity and kind of find those communities to make work in. That I think I struggled a lot with there. Unfortunately, what a problem with Birmingham is that there's a lot of great festivals. There's a lot of great kind of big events that happen, but there's not enough kind of year-round support for young emerging artists. So that's kind of tricky, because then the big festivals are there investing all their time in making this big spectacle that happens once, maybe twice a biennial. Yeah. But then if you're local, you're then like, this is great, but then what happens is 360 other days of the year.
What have you got to do?
Yeah. Or like where do you go to kind of keep seeing this work or keep meeting people who are interested in that? But yeah, I think it's improved. I think I've reconnected with it a lot more since then. Also because London is becoming more difficult. London is not as escalating in price. Generally, it's competitive, because the percentage of artists per square metre is higher. So you're
certain
more conflict.
Parts of London.
Yeah, particularly East London. South East London. Yeah.
So you said something interesting a moment ago in terms of the club kids, and you said about the extreme expression of their art to show themselves, an extreme expression of their own character. So in terms of performance art or live art, how do you see the idea of kind of expressing something that's not real, quite extreme, gets people's attention, often within a particular persona? How does that enable someone to express themselves, or are they expressing themselves? What is it they're expressing?
I think with performance art, it's particularly because often, which is kind of why I prefer it to theatre, like kind of conventional theatre. It's about kind of why I see like it's kind of archaeology of the self. You're kind of understanding who you are, and that kind of power of transformation, of becoming something that is both almost like a kind of hyper self of who you are. And that's something I kind of look at a lot in what I do, in terms of you look at personas that you identify with, also don't identify with, kind of that sense of like disidentification, and you find a way of embodying it, and that's often, that embodiment can be through how the club kids did, of like kind of extreme or senses of clothing, but often it can, in some way, it can be quite, you can understand the self through pushing its physical boundaries. If you look at kind of endurance art, or kind of very body-based work, where you are very actually looking at how understanding kind of the limits of what your body can go through, whether that's pain or endurance.
Lee Bowery comes to mind.
Yes, yeah. I'm trying to understand that the limits of your body can then have this different reading, both for people, I guess, for perhaps younger generations who feel kind of inspired, that you think, wow, these people are doing incredible things with their bodies and their place in the kind of public space. I think that relationship of public space is probably something I picked up on a lot of, like, they didn't need to kind of hide or closet or only show this kind what they were wearing to either just to themselves, but that they were willing to kind of risk and put their bodies on the line and go out into the street dressed like that. So I guess that's something I've always been really interested in, like where is the performance happening, and if it's happening in a kind of white cube space with like a very small kind of in crowd of people who've probably seen it before, if it's happening on a very public domain.
It seems like that, particularly Lee Bowery, it was 24/7 for him.
Yes.
It appeared. Literally going down the street looking at fabrics in different parts of East London.
Yeah.
You'd be dressed up in kind of outrageous costumes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when he was dressed in so-called normal attire, I think a couple of people he was very close to said that it was an extreme normal, like it didn't look right.
Yeah, if they were so familiar with how he would normally present himself.
Yeah,
absolutely. Perhaps going back to ritual, I think there's an interesting relationship between the ritual that is with this kind of like dressing up with this kind of transformative potential of kind of outrageous presentations of the self, and it kind of both simultaneously is able to disguise you from, it creates a kind of like a bubble in some way between the outside world, because you're not presenting yourself in a kind of normative fashion or civilian way, but at the same time it's also drawing an incredible amount of attention to yourself. So it's that, it depends how you would read it. Some people would find it kind of like ugly, or people have a lot of questions as to be like, why are you dressed like this? But on the other hand, it also creates a kind of interesting like protective layer to yourself, because you're spending more time in kind of, I guess it's that time I'm interested in that time of the actual ritual process of applying makeup or dressing up, or almost before you reach the point of performance, whether that's in like performance space or the street or the bus. It's been interesting to talk to artists about what that time is when they're getting ready time. Something I kind of always really enjoyed before I'd go to a club, or before I find it's quite stressful now, kind of getting ready for performance, because it's like you're always so time pressured. Whereas before you'd have all the time in the world to like pre-drink and talk to your friends.
Okay, so what's the difference between the performances now and the performances then?
Yeah, I guess levels of anonymity. I like the fact when I was younger, it didn't necessarily. I didn't know what I was doing was necessarily performance. I just thought I want. It felt there was the agenda there of it being people witnessing it and people seeing it as kind of like as an event was not there. It was more kind of happenstance. It was just happened. People, and it felt almost kind of more for its sake, compared to now, where it feels that it's expected. It's because I've applied to something, or someone's invited me to make a performance somewhere. There's the agenda that whatever you're presenting is a performance, and that there's no anonymity because it's now tied to a name, my name. Then it becomes my work in that sense. Whereas before, nobody knew who I was. I'd be on the street, and it became just kind of spectacle for its sake, rather than this is a performance by Sebastian that is meant to reference XYZ and was made for this platform, which is looking at ritual, or always in a space like a theatre or a club night.
Performances like La Santa Muerte is the reason I like performance art so much. It was immersive and visceral, and a communal experience for all of us in the audience. And it was also interesting for me to find out more about the deity's importance in Mexican life to the people who adopt her as their deity. In next week's episode, Seb will continue to talk about his art projects, but don't forget to look up his performance at the Camden People's Theatre. So until then, see you next week.